There's been a lot of speculation lately about what's in Canada's new food guide. Well, now we know. And there are some major changes from the old guide. So here is the kind of plate we are now being told we should be eating. You can see lots of vegetables, lots of fruits, not a whole lot of protein, not a lot of grains. And what do you wash it all down with? Water. The Minister of Health launched the new guide in Montreal this morning.
It aims to change the way Canadians see food, and it begins with a simple idea that eating should be a pleasure. Canada's food guide reflects an important concept. Healthy eating is more than just the food that you eat, and it gives Canadians the tools they need to eat healthy. It puts more focus on what, when, and how we eat, and less on food groups and servings. It gives clear, concise advice that everyone can easily apply to their everyday lives. Things like cooking more often, eating with others, and limiting highly processed foods. But the Canada Food Guide is more than just a colorful page. It's truly a powerful resource.
The old guide was organized around food groups and servings. That's no longer the case. Instead, there's a lot about what we should be doing, such as making sure we're properly hydrated. CBC's Nicole Ireland breaks it all down.
Instead of meat, we're now seeing this protein category, and we're seeing a huge emphasis on eating plant-based foods. So, even when you look at the cover of the new Canada Food Guide, you can see, you see a plate, and you don't see a lot. You see maybe a little bit of chicken, a little bit of fish, but you see a lot of tofu, you see a lot of legumes, nuts, seeds, that kind of thing on that protein category. Not a big surprise that vegetables and fruits, of course, big emphasis on that, and whole grains. We've heard this before, whole grain bread, pastas, rice, that kind of thing. But what's also really interesting here is there used to be numbers of servings suggested in the old Canada Food Guide, so those are gone. So now we're seeing sort of more of a proportion idea. So, when you look at that plate on the cover of the new food guide, you see half of that plate is covered with fruits and vegetables, but a quarter of that plate is covered with protein, but a quarter of the plate is that whole grain component. What's even more interesting, though, is looking next to that plate. So look next to that plate, what should we be drinking with our meals? And Health Canada is saying water. So as you mentioned, staying hydrated. Now, what's interesting about that is not only drinking water to stay hydrated and because it doesn't have the calories and all of that, but that means fruit juice is gone. So fruit juice is actually categorized in this food guide under the category of sugary beverages. So there's actually an explicit, Health Canada is saying, you know what, that's one of those foods that you should keep to a minimum. So I think we're going to see a lot of reaction.
For all those years, when I was raising my kids and they were little and I was giving them
orange
their
juice for breakfast,
meat, and here's your bit of beef because you need that. We were wrong.
So they say. So they say. I mean, they're putting fruit juice in the same category as those sugary beverages, as pop, and high degrees of sugar. So they're really trying to bring down sugar, bring down sodium. Interesting thing with fat, though, is that they actually say in this food guide that they're not trying to reduce overall fat consumption. They're really trying to break out sort of those good fats versus bad fats. So the fats that don't contribute to high cholesterol, and they're trying to sort of change that. So they also talk about fad diets. They don't want people to be, going on these diets where it's sort of all or nothing. They're sort of maintaining that kind of balanced approach.
Right. But could one argue that the old Canada Food Guide was a fad then, if it's changed so dramatically? I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate here because food is important to all of us. What's the other piece of advice to come out of this? Not just what should be on your plate, but in terms of eating.
Well, this is another interesting thing is that they're actually sort of talking about advice on how we eat, so eating behavior. So, and really that's kind of common sense stuff that we've been hearing from dietitians and nutritionists for years, really. So they're talking about sort of, cooking more food as opposed to eating out. It's sort of I guess nutritionists would call that a no-brainer, but there it is. Talking about eating your food with people, so it's sort of a social cultural activity, enjoying your food, chewing your food, savoring it, so that's meant to slow us down. The other thing that this food guide talks about that we haven't seen as much of in the past is sort of the cultural aspects of food. So we see a section, for instance, talking about Indigenous food. So we see sort of the value of food that First Nations and Inuit, hunting, fishing, berry picking, growing vegetables, that kind of component. So that whole cultural component is also included in this guide.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with all of you today, and thank you so much for the warm welcome. I have to say it's a bit warmer inside than it is outside, but being your Acadian cousin from New Brunswick, we certainly appreciate the weather, and that's why we're a little bit late this morning as a result of following une souffleuse here, so my apologies for the delay. Avant de commencer, je voudrais reconnaître que nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui sur le territoire traditionnel de la nation Mohawk. Je voudrais aussi remercier tous et chacun d'entre vous d'être présents avec nous ici aujourd'hui. C'est un plaisir de pouvoir parler de la question de saine alimentation. Today we gather here to talk about food. A dictionary will tell you that food is something that people and animals eat, or that plants absorb to keep them alive. But I'm here to say that food is so much more than that. Food is like comfort, like the taste of mom's cooking. And I know if I look back at my memories of my mom, I certainly remember being the youngest of a family of 9 kids, waking up in the morning to the aroma of fresh bread. And I couldn't wait to get downstairs and put perhaps a little bit of butter on it and just savor it. But food is also more than that. I also remember coming home and after school, and Mom would make some cookies and biscuits. And once again, that aroma and those memories certainly stay with us. Food is culture, like recipes passed down through generations. But my mom, fortunately, I cooked with her because when I used to call her and ask her for more information about her recipes, what would she tell me? Well, Jeanette, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So fortunately, I was there to see what the little bit of this and the little bit of that was. Food is also tradition, like Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, or the Passover Seder. As the late Anthony Bourdain once said, food is everything we are. Food for me is about family. En grandissant, la cuisine faisait partie de notre vie
the kitchen
quotidienne.
was part of our daily
Et
life.
je dois l'essentiel de ce
And
que je sais
I owe
aujourd'hui
what I know today when it comes to
grâce à mon père.
food to my father.
Jardinier passionné,
He was a passionate gardener, and he loved growing his own fruit, vegetables,
cela
and other
signifie
items.
beaucoup d'aliments frais et
He
nutritifs
liked
sur
to
notre
use
table.
a lot of nutritional and fresh food, but I must point out that he liked to garden but not cook. So we spent some great time together eating that great food. But my experience has become less and less common, unfortunately, today. How many of us must choose quick food rather than the best food? And unfortunately, our food habits suffer. So it's important that people know that the information out there can be contradictory and confusing. Everyone, I'm sure, has received advice at some point about eating. And we are trying, and people are out there offering every single possible option to people when it comes to food.
Sounds easy. We know that often it truly isn't. Our lives are busier than ever, and it's often a struggle to find the time to make the healthy choice. I know oftentimes these days, as we're working on our healthy eating strategy, when I'm in the grocery store, I really take the time to observe people and their families and their children. And I see them with 2 kids in tow, rushing through the grocery aisles with the cell phone in hand and trying to make some healthy choices. Everyone is competing for time. I know just how challenging it can be to eat well when we're juggling work, travel, and family commitments. And I thought my life was hectic before I became the health minister. Well, we all know what that's about. But I'm hardly unique. Almost every Canadian feels this way at some point in time. Yet, it's not that. Our decisions about what and how we eat are the product of many different factors, from taste to tradition. Faced with these challenges, Canadians deserve an easy, simple source of advice they know that they can trust. C'est là que le guide alimentaire canadien
That's where
entre en
Canada's
jeu.
food
Depuis
guide
plus de
comes in.
75 ans, les
For
Canadiens
75 years,
de passion
Canadians right
se
across
fient
this
au guide
country have been
alimentaire.
relying on Canada's food guide.
L'histoire du guide débute pendant la
The history of the guide goes back to World War II. Because there was a shortage of food and a population that had to remain healthy, the government of the day, Mackenzie King, brought in official regulations on food. It was introduced in 1942 and was intended to fight disease and also provide for the reality of rationing during a war period. But since then, our country has changed. We are certainly far more diversified. We have welcomed new Canadians from every corner of the globe who bring with them their own culinary traditions and an introduction to new foods in every region of the country. And just as Canada has changed, the Canada Food Guide has also changed. There have been at least 8 revisions, the most recent one in 2007. We went from a guide that had to manage food intake during the war to explaining how to eat healthy. This is now the second government document that you can download online. And I'm convinced that this guide is much more pleasant to read now. The Canada Food Guide still provides Canadians with practical and reliable advice as to how and what to eat. It's time now to write the next chapter in that history, and that is why we are all here this morning.
Today, we are officially unveiling Canada's new food guide, and I think we deserve a round of applause for that. It aims to change the way Canadians see food, and it begins with a simple idea that eating should be a pleasure. Canada's food guide reflects an important concept. Healthy eating is more than just the food that you eat, and it gives Canadians the tools they need to eat healthy. It puts more focus on what, when, and how we eat, and less on food groups and servings. It gives clear, concise advice that everyone can easily apply to their everyday lives. Things like cooking more often, eating with others, and limiting highly processed foods. But the Canada Food Guide is more than just a colorful page. It's truly a powerful resource. It might be hard to believe, but the last time that the food guide was updated, there was no such thing as an iPhone. And can any of us here even imagine a time without an iPhone? Since then, technology has transformed our world, and it has also transformed our food guide. And that is why this edition was updated not just with the latest nutritional science, but also the latest technological changes as well. The familiar image is only the tip of the iceberg. This new food guide is really an extensive set of resources that every Canadian from coast to coast to coast has access to online. On canada.ca/food guide, you'll find a host of materials from resources for health professionals to fun recipes we all can enjoy. And I'm telling you, this weekend when I get back home, there's a few recipes there that I'm going to be trying out. While previous food guides were static documents, this one is truly different. It will continue to be updated with the latest dietary knowledge over the coming years. Nous savons que les aliments mangés au Canada sont aussi diversifiés que la population canadienne et le nouveau guide alimentaire
and must be included in this new Canada Food Guide. That is particularly important for Indigenous people, and I'm proud of the work that we carried out with the First Peoples. We developed tools specially adapted to their cuisine. The food that we eat is a critical part in being healthy. However, the reverse is also true. Poor eating can also lead to chronic disease, many of which begin, unfortunately, among young people. That is why the new version of Canada's Food Guide that we are unveiling today is so important. The guide alone is not enough, but this is the cornerstone of a whole series of initiatives to help Canadians make healthy choices. We call that the healthy eating strategy. I know that governments have a lot of strategies, but I have to say that this one is different. It is a whole series of concrete initiatives aimed at helping Canadians to eat healthy. What is this all about, perhaps? Well, first of all, we have prohibited certain industrial foods. We're also working on certain new regulations on packaging. We also intend to limit advertising on unhealthy foods. And there is a bill in process in Parliament. We will also be spending $25 million on the participation program to encourage Canadians to become more active.
I know that many Canadians have a special affinity for the Canada Food Guide. For many, this goes back when they first saw it at school. And I know for me, when I think of the Canada Food Guide, I think of opening up my cupboard in the kitchen, and that's where it was when I was a child. As such, updating it is not a responsibility that we took lightly. The product is a beautiful, thorough, and powerful tool to help all Canadians eat healthy. It reflects the Canada of 2019, while keeping an eye to the Canada of the future.